HOA president attacks pregnant woman with helmet. What happens next will leave you in tears. When Karen's hatred turned violent, she thought her powerful husband would protect her. But she didn't know the victim's husband was a decorated detective who would stop at nothing for justice. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The afternoon sun blazed over Riverside Heights, casting long shadows across the pristine lawns and perfectly trimmed hedges. Sarah Mitchell sat on her front porch, one hand resting on her 8-month pregnant belly, the other holding a glass of lemonade. She watched her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, draw colorful chalk butterflies on the driveway. "Mommy, look. This one's for the baby," Emma called out, her pigtails bouncing as she hopped excitedly. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with love. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Life had been good lately." Her husband, Detective Marcus Mitchell, had just received a promotion at the police department. They'd moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago, dreaming of raising their growing family in peace. But peace was about to shatter. The click of high heels on pavement made Sarah look up. Margaret Thornton, the HOA president, marched toward them with her clipboard clutched like a weapon. Her bleached blonde hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her face, and her lips were pressed into a thin line of perpetual disapproval. "Mrs. Mitchell," Margaret's voice was sharp as broken glass. "We need to talk about these violations." Sarah stood slowly, supporting her back. "Violations? What do you mean?" Margaret gestured dramatically at Emma's chalk art. "This. Article 7, Section 3 of our HOA bylaws clearly states no markings on driveways or walkways. This is unacceptable." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "It's just chalk. It washes away with rain. Rules are rules." Margaret's eyes were cold. "And your garden gnome? 2 inches too tall. Your welcome mat? Wrong shade of brown. Your mailbox needs repainting. I'm fining you $500. $500 for chalk drawings." Sarah's voice trembled. "Margaret, please be reasonable. She's just a child playing. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. Rules exist for a reason." Margaret stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming. "People like you think you can just move into our neighborhood and do whatever you want. Well, not on my watch." Emma had stopped drawing and was now hiding behind her mother's legs, sensing the tension. "Mommy?" Emma's small voice was frightened. Sarah placed a protective hand on her daughter's head. "It's okay, baby." She looked at Margaret. "I'll clean it up right now. Please, just give us a warning this time." "Too late. The fine stands. And if I see any more violations, I'll have you evicted." Margaret turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots. Sarah's hands shook as she helped Emma wash away the chalk art. Tears rolled down her daughter's cheeks. "Why is that lady so mean, Mommy?" Sarah had no answer. How do you explain cruelty to a 5-year-old? That evening, Marcus came home to find his wife crying at the kitchen table, the HOA violation notice spread before her. Hey, what's wrong?" He knelt beside her, concern flooding his dark eyes. Sarah told him everything. Marcus's jaw tightened with each word, but he kept his voice calm. "I'll talk to her. This is harassment. She hates us, Marcus. I don't know why, but she does." Marcus pulled his wife close. "Don't worry. We'll figure this out. Together." But Margaret Thornton was just getting started. Over the next 2 weeks, the violations multiplied like weeds. Sarah received citations for leaving her trash can out 15 minutes past collection time. For planting flowers that were allegedly the wrong height. For Emma's bicycle being visible from the street. Each fine was more ridiculous than the last, and each time Margaret's smile grew wider. The other neighbors began avoiding the Mitchells, afraid of drawing Margaret's wrath. The woman ruled the HOA like a tyrant, and everyone knew crossing her meant becoming her next target. Sarah's stress levels soared. Her doctor warned that the anxiety wasn't good for the baby. Marcus filed formal complaints, but Margaret had stacked the HOA board with her friends. Every complaint was dismissed. "She's untouchable," Marcus told his wife one night, frustration evident in his voice. Her husband's some big-shot lawyer. Everyone's afraid of them. Sarah placed his hand on her belly, where their son kicked strongly. "We can't let her win, Marcus. This is our home. Our children deserve better." The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was returning from a prenatal appointment, moving slowly due to false labor contractions that morning. Emma skipped beside her, holding a balloon the doctor's office had given her. "Can we get ice cream, Mommy? Please. After dinner, I promise." Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. They were halfway up the driveway when Margaret appeared, seemingly from nowhere. Her face was twisted with fury. "Your car." She pointed at their sedan. "You parked it on the street last night. That's a violation. Only garage parking is allowed after 10 p.m. Sarah's patience finally snapped. "Margaret, my husband worked a late shift. He parked there for 1 hour before moving it. 1 hour. Rules don't have exceptions." Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. "You people think you're special, but you're not. I'll have you thrown out of this neighborhood. You people." Sarah's voice went quiet and dangerous. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Margaret's face flushed, but her eyes glinted with malice. "You know exactly what I mean. Your kind doesn't belong here." The racist undertone was unmistakable. Sarah felt ice in her veins. "My kind? My husband is a decorated police detective who serves this community. What exactly have you done besides terrorize your neighbors?" Emma clutched her mother's hand, the balloon forgotten. Margaret stepped forward, her finger jabbing toward Sarah's face. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. You'll be evicted by the end of the month." "Mommy, I'm scared," Emma whispered. Sarah turned to lead her daughter inside, but Margaret grabbed her arm roughly. "Don't you walk away from me. Let go of me." Sarah tried to pull free, but Margaret's grip tightened. "You'll listen when I'm talking to you." What happened next would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. As Sarah yanked her arm back, Margaret stumbled. In her rage, the HOA president grabbed the first thing her hand found, Emma's bicycle helmet hanging from the handlebars of the bike leaning against the porch. In one swift, unthinking motion, Margaret swung the helmet. It connected with Sarah's temple with a sickening thud. Sarah dropped to her knees, the world spinning. Warm blood trickled down her face. Emma screamed, a sound of pure terror that shattered the afternoon quiet. Margaret stood frozen, the helmet still in her hand, her face going pale as she realized what she'd done. "Mommy! Mommy!" Emma was sobbing, trying to help her mother up. Sarah's vision blurred. She felt wetness between her legs and knew with horrible certainty that her water had broken. But something was wrong. The liquid was tinged with red. "Call 911, Sarah gasped. "The baby." Margaret backed away, dropping the helmet. "This is your fault. You made me. Get help." Sarah screamed with the last of her strength before darkness took her. Neighbors had emerged from their houses at Emma's screams. Mrs. Patterson from next door rushed over, phone already to her ear. Mr. Chen scooped up the traumatized Emma, shielding her from the sight of her mother's blood on the driveway. Margaret Thornton ran. She actually ran back to her house and locked the door, leaving Sarah bleeding on the pavement. The ambulance arrived within minutes. So did Marcus, his police cruiser screeching to a halt behind the ambulance. Someone from the neighborhood had called him, their voice shaking, "Your wife's been hurt. Come now." Marcus saw Sarah on the stretcher, unconscious, and something inside him broke and reformed into steel. What happened? His voice was deadly calm as he approached the gathering crowd. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Margaret Thornton hit her with a helmet. Hit a pregnant woman. We all saw it. Mr. Chen held Emma, who was still crying. She hit Mommy, Daddy. The mean lady hit Mommy and Mommy fell down and there was blood and Marcus gently took his daughter, holding her close. It's okay, baby. Mommy's going to be fine. He looked at Mrs. Patterson. Is that true? Margaret hit my wife. We saw everything. She grabbed Sarah's arm first, then when Sarah pulled away, Margaret hit her with the bike helmet. Deliberately. Then she ran. Marcus handed Emma to Mrs. Patterson. Please watch her. I need to get to the hospital. We'll take care of her. Go. And Marcus? Mrs. Patterson's voice hardened. That woman needs to pay for what she did. At the hospital, the next 4 hours were the longest of Marcus Mitchell's life. Sarah had a concussion and a deep gash requiring 12 stitches. But it was the baby everyone worried about. The doctors worked frantically. The placenta had partially detached from the impact and stress. Sarah needed an emergency C-section. Marcus held his wife's hand as they wheeled her into surgery. Her eyes fluttered open briefly. Marcus, the baby. He's going to be fine. You're both going to be fine. I promise you. But he didn't know if it was a promise he could keep. In the waiting room, Marcus's phone rang constantly. His captain. His colleagues. Neighbors wanting updates. And 3 messages from Margaret Thornton's husband, attorney Richard Thornton, threatening lawsuits if Marcus persecuted his wife. Marcus listened to the last message and felt fury unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The arrogance. The entitlement. A man defending his wife's attack on a pregnant woman. His phone rang again. His captain's voice was serious. Marcus, I heard what happened. Whatever you need. And son. I'm temporarily assigning you desk duty. You're too close to this. But between you and me, make sure that woman faces everything she deserves. I will, sir. That's a promise. At midnight, a doctor finally emerged. Marcus stood so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. Mr. Mitchell. Your wife is stable. The surgery went well. And my son? The doctor smiled. He's small, 4 pounds, 6 ounces, but he's breathing on his own. He's a fighter. They both are. Marcus felt tears stream down his face. Can I see them? Of course. Sarah was pale but awake when Marcus entered her recovery room. In the incubator beside her bed lay their son, tiny but perfect, his little chest rising and falling steadily. Marcus. Sarah's voice was hoarse. Is Emma okay? She's with Mrs. Patterson. She's safe. Baby, I'm so sorry. I should have been there. You couldn't have known. Sarah's hand found his. But Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that woman won't hurt anyone else ever again. Promise me she'll pay for what she did. Marcus looked at his premature son, at his injured wife, and made a vow. She will. I give you my word. The next morning, Marcus returned to work. But he wasn't investigating. He was building a case. As a detective, he knew exactly what needed to happen. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. First, he collected witness statements. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen, and 4 other neighbors all gave detailed accounts of Margaret's attack. Their stories matched perfectly. Second, he obtained the hospital records documenting Sarah's injuries and the baby's premature birth, directly linked to the assault. Third, and this was crucial, he requested security footage from Mrs. Patterson's doorbell camera. The Ring camera had captured everything in crystal clear video: Margaret grabbing Sarah, Sarah trying to escape, and Margaret deliberately swinging the helmet into Sarah's head. It was damning evidence. Marcus also uncovered something interesting while reviewing HOA complaints. Margaret had a pattern. Over the past 3 years, she'd targeted 7 families in the neighborhood. All of them had been minorities. All had eventually moved away, unable to handle her harassment. The Mitchells were supposed to be number 8. Marcus compiled everything into a comprehensive report and handed it to the district attorney personally. Detective Mitchell. DA Janet Reeves flipped through the file, her expression growing darker with each page. This is assault causing bodily harm, assault on a pregnant woman, endangerment of an unborn child, and there's enough here for a pattern of harassment and possibly hate crime enhancements. She needs to be arrested, ma'am. She will be. Today. Reeves looked up. How's your wife? Recovering. Our son's still in NICU, but he's getting stronger. Then let's make sure the person responsible faces the full weight of the law. That afternoon, 2 uniformed officers knocked on Margaret Thornton's door. Her husband answered, his expensive suit and practiced smile firmly in place. Officers, is there a problem? We need to speak with Margaret Thornton. My wife isn't available. Whatever this is about, you can speak to me. I'm her attorney. Sir, we have a warrant for your wife's arrest. Please step aside. Richard Thornton's face went red. This is outrageous. You can't just. We can and we are. The lead officer pushed past him. Mrs. Thornton. Police. Come out now. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs, her face crumpling when she saw the officers. No. No, this isn't happening. I didn't do anything wrong. Margaret Thornton, you're under arrest for aggravated assault, assault on a pregnant woman, and endangerment of an unborn child. The officer read her Miranda rights as Margaret began to cry. She provoked me. She was rude and disrespectful. I barely touched her. Ma'am, we have video evidence showing you striking Mrs. Mitchell with a helmet. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As they led Margaret out in handcuffs, neighbors emerged from their houses. Not to support her, but to watch. Years of fear and resentment showed on their faces. The tyrant was finally being held accountable. Mrs. Patterson stood on her porch, arms crossed. Good riddance. Richard Thornton followed the police car to the station, already on the phone with expensive lawyers. But Marcus had anticipated this. The evidence was ironclad. The video footage showed everything. Margaret's own statements to police, made before her husband arrived, only made things worse. She'd actually told the officers that Sarah deserved it for not showing proper respect. At arraignment the next day, the judge set bail at $250,000. Your Honor, this is excessive, Richard Thornton argued. My wife is a respected community member with no criminal record. Your wife, the judge said coldly, reviewing the case file, assaulted a pregnant woman, causing her to deliver prematurely. She then fled the scene, showing no remorse. Bail stands. Next case. Margaret spent 2 nights in jail before Richard posted bail. She emerged pale and shaking, her perfect veneer completely shattered. But the community's response was just beginning. An emergency HOA meeting was called, this time, not by Margaret. Every family she'd ever harassed showed up. The room was packed. Mrs. Patterson stood first. I move for Margaret Thornton's immediate removal as HOA president and from the board entirely. Seconded, came from multiple voices. The vote was unanimous. 32-0. Margaret sat in the back corner, her husband beside her, both looking stunned. Furthermore, Mr. Chen continued, I move that we vote to dissolve the current HOA bylaws and rebuild them with reasonable, non-discriminatory rules. Rules that can't be weaponized against families. Another unanimous vote. As people filed out, several stopped by the Mitchells' house over the following days, bringing meals and gifts for the baby. They also brought something else, their own stories of Margaret's cruelty. She fined us for our son's basketball hoop. She reported my grandmother to Adult Protective Services, claiming we were neglecting her. It was all lies. She threatened to have our dog taken away because he barked once. The pattern was clear. Margaret Thornton had been a bully, drunk on her tiny amount of power, wielding the HOA like a weapon. Marcus documented everything. Every story added weight to the prosecution's case. 6 weeks later, Sarah brought their son, Michael, home from the hospital. He was healthy now, thriving despite his rough start. Emma was overjoyed to finally meet her baby brother. The family was healing. But the legal battle was just beginning. Margaret's trial was set for 3 months later. Richard Thornton hired a team of expensive defense attorneys. They tried everything, claiming Sarah had attacked Margaret first, arguing the helmet blow was accidental, suggesting Sarah's fall caused her own injuries. But the evidence didn't lie. The video footage was played in court. The jury watched in silence as Margaret grabbed Sarah, as Sarah tried to pull away, as Margaret's face twisted with rage and she swung the helmet in a clear, deliberate arc. They watched Sarah fall. They watched Margaret run. They heard Emma's screams on the audio. Several jurors wiped tears from their eyes. The prosecution called witness after witness. Neighbors testified about years of harassment. The Mitchells' doctor testified about Sarah's injuries and Michael's premature birth, explaining how the trauma directly caused the placental abruption. Sarah took the stand, Marcus holding Michael in the gallery behind her. "Mrs. Mitchell, can you describe what happened that day?" Sarah's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I was coming home from a doctor's appointment. I was 8 months pregnant, dealing with false labor. I just wanted to get inside and rest." Margaret approached us, screaming about parking violations. "When I tried to walk away, she grabbed me. Then she hit me." "How did that make you feel?" "Terrified. Not just for myself, but for my children." Emma was right there. She saw everything. And I knew something was wrong with the baby immediately. I felt him. Sarah's voice broke. I felt him in distress. I thought I was going to lose him. "Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell." No further questions. The defense attorney stood. "Mrs. Mitchell, isn't it true you and Mrs. Thornton had been arguing?" "She was yelling at me. I was trying to de-escalate." "But you did talk back to her, correct? You said some harsh things." Sarah's eyes hardened. "I defended myself against someone who had been harassing my family for months. That doesn't give anyone the right to assault me." The defense attorney had no response to that. Margaret took the stand in her own defense, against her lawyer's advice. "It was a disaster. Mrs. Thornton, why did you strike Mrs. Mitchell?" "I didn't mean to hurt her. She just made me so angry. She was so disrespectful, and she wouldn't listen, and I just snapped." "So you admit you hit her intentionally?" Margaret realized her mistake too late. "No, I mean, it was an accident." "Sort of. She shouldn't have provoked me." The prosecutor pounced. "Mrs. Thornton, you've stated both that you didn't mean to hurt her and that she provoked you. Which is it?" Both. I don't know. This is all her fault." "Her fault that you hit her?" "Yes. She should have just followed the rules." The prosecutor pulled out a thick folder. "Mrs. Thornton, you've filed over 300 HOA violations in the past 3 years. You've targeted primarily families of color. You've even written in emails we've obtained through discovery, that you wanted to keep the neighborhood a certain type of people. What did you mean by that?" Margaret's face went white. that was taken out of context. Really? Because the context was an email chain where you discussed ways to make minority families uncomfortable enough to move. Would you like me to read those emails aloud? Objection. Richard Thornton's lawyer shouted. Overruled. Answer the question, Mrs. Thornton. Margaret began to cry. I was just trying to maintain property values. That's all. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But someone did get hurt. A pregnant woman and her unborn child. And you left them bleeding on the pavement. Isn't that correct? I panicked. You panicked, or you didn't care. Margaret had no answer. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Marcus sat with Sarah in the courtroom as the verdict was read. Emma was in school. Michael was with Mrs. Patterson, who'd become like a grandmother to the children. On the count of aggravated assault, we find the defendant guilty. Margaret gasped. On the count of assault on a pregnant woman, we find the defendant guilty. Richard Thornton put his head in his hands. On the count of endangerment of an unborn child, we find the defendant guilty. Sarah's hand found Marcus's, squeezing tight. The judge looked at Margaret over reading glasses. Mrs. Thornton, you have been found guilty on all counts. This court will reconvene in 2 weeks for sentencing. Until then, you will remain free on bail. But let me be clear, you used your position of minor authority to terrorize your neighbors, and when confronted, you responded with violence against a pregnant woman. This court takes such matters very seriously. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was packed for sentencing. The judge allowed victim impact statements. Sarah stood, Marcus beside her. Your Honor, Margaret Thornton's actions nearly cost me my son. My daughter has nightmares. She's afraid of women who look like Mrs. Thornton. She flinches when people raise their voices. My son spent the first weeks of his life fighting to survive. I still have headaches from the concussion. But worse than the physical scars are the emotional ones. She made us feel unwelcome in our own home, in our own community. She targeted us because of the color of our skin. That kind of hatred has no place in society. Other neighbors spoke too, describing years of harassment. Finally, the judge spoke. Mrs. Thornton, you have shown a pattern of behavior that goes beyond simple HOA enforcement. You weaponized rules to target families you deemed undesirable. When that wasn't enough, you resorted to violence. You struck a pregnant woman hard enough to cause her to deliver prematurely. You showed no remorse, no responsibility. You left her bleeding while you ran away. The law is clear on such matters. Margaret was sobbing now, her expensive makeup running down her face. I hereby sentence you to 5 years in state prison on the aggravated assault charge, 5 years on the assault of a pregnant woman charge, and 3 years on the endangerment charge. These sentences will run consecutively. That's 13 years total. You will also be required to pay full restitution to the Mitchell family for medical expenses, therapy costs, and emotional damages. The court sets restitution at $500,000. Margaret let out a wail of despair. Furthermore, you are permanently prohibited from serving on any HOA board or similar organization upon your release. Court is adjourned. As they led Margaret away in handcuffs, she looked back at Sarah one last time. Sarah met her eyes, not with hatred, but with something worse, pity. Margaret had lost everything, her freedom, her reputation, her power, because she couldn't let go of hatred and control. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the Mitchells. How do you feel about the verdict, Mrs. Mitchell? Sarah adjusted Michael in her arms, Marcus holding Emma's hand. I feel relieved. Justice was served. But more importantly, I hope this sends a message that no one is above the law. Power, no matter how small, cannot be used to harm others. Will you stay in the neighborhood? Marcus answered this time. Absolutely. It's our home. Our neighbors have become family. We won't be driven out by one person's hatred. That evening, the Mitchell family sat together in their living room. Emma was drawing, not on the driveway this time, but on proper paper. She drew their family, her parents, her baby brother, and herself, all holding hands under a rainbow. "Is the mean lady gone forever, Daddy?" Emma asked. Marcus pulled his daughter into his lap. "She's gone for a very long time, sweetheart. And she can't hurt anyone anymore." "Good." Emma went back to her drawing, satisfied. Sarah watched her family, her heart full despite everything they'd been through. Michael cooed in her arms, healthy and growing stronger each day. Marcus sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. They had survived. Not just survived, they had stood up to cruelty and won. The next weekend, the new HOA board held a neighborhood barbecue. It was a celebration of new beginnings. Families who had been too afraid to socialize under Margaret's reign now gathered openly, laughing and sharing stories. Mrs. Patterson approached Sarah, who was keeping Michael shaded under an umbrella. "How are you doing, dear?" "Better. Every day gets a little easier. You know, what you did, standing up to her, pressing charges, seeing it through, you freed all of us. We'd been living in fear for so long, we'd forgotten what it was like to actually enjoy our homes." Sarah smiled. "We all freed each other. You testified. You supported us. That's what community really means." Mr. Chen joined them, carrying a plate of food for Sarah. "For you and the little one. You need your strength." "Thank you." Sarah accepted gratefully. "You know, when we first moved here, I thought it was a mistake. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." The neighborhood had transformed. Children played in yards without fear of violations. Families decorated for holidays enthusiastically. People actually talked to each other, helped each other. The dark cloud of Margaret Thornton's reign had lifted, and sunshine had returned. Marcus watched from the grill, flipping burgers, his daughter helping him. This was what he'd wanted when they'd moved here, a safe, happy place to raise his children. They'd fought for it, and they'd won. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter. It was from the state prison, from Margaret Thornton. Sarah almost threw it away, but something made her open it. The letter was short. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell. I know you probably never want to hear from me again. I don't blame you. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. About who I became. I was so focused on control, on keeping things perfect, that I lost sight of what truly matters. I let my prejudices turn me into a monster. I can never undo what I did to you and your family. I can never give back the peaceful pregnancy I stole from you, or erase your daughter's trauma, or undo your son's difficult start in life. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my days. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I was, and I'm ashamed. Prison has stripped away all my pretenses. I'm no longer the HOA president with power over others. I'm just a woman who destroyed her own life through hatred and cruelty. I hope your family is well. I hope your son is thriving. I hope your daughter has forgotten the terrible things she witnessed. And I hope you found peace in your home. I'm truly sorry, even though those words feel painfully inadequate. Margaret Thornton." Sarah read the letter twice, then showed it to Marcus that evening. "What do you think?" she asked. Marcus considered carefully. "I think she's finally facing consequences for the first time in her life. Whether she's really changed or just feels sorry for herself, time will tell. But it's not our problem anymore. Should I respond? Do you want to?" Sarah looked at their children, both sleeping peacefully in their rooms. She thought about the journey they'd been on, from terror to triumph. "No," she said finally. "The best response is living well. Raising our children in love, not hate. Building the community she tried to destroy. That's how we truly win." Marcus kissed his wife's forehead. "That's my girl." Sarah never responded to the letter. But she didn't throw it away either. She kept it as a reminder that even the cruelest people are capable of change, though change doesn't erase consequences. Years passed. Emma grew into a confident young woman who stood up to bullies at school, remembering her own experience. Michael thrived, showing no lasting effects from his difficult birth. He was a joyful child, full of laughter and mischief. The neighborhood flourished. Property values actually increased once the oppressive HOA rules were relaxed and people took genuine pride in their homes. New families moved in, attracted by the welcoming community. Marcus made captain, leading his department with the same dedication he'd shown his family. Sarah went back to work as a teacher, inspiring young minds with stories of courage and justice. And every year on Michael's birthday, the family took a moment to remember how far they'd come. They'd faced hatred and violence, but they hadn't let it break them. One evening, 10 years after the incident, Emma asked her parents about Margaret Thornton. At 15, she barely remembered the details but knew the broad strokes of the story. Whatever happened to her? Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. They'd kept tabs over the years. She was released from prison last year, Sarah said. She moved to another state. Her husband divorced her during her sentence. She lost most of her money to legal fees and restitution payments. Do you think she's still the same person? Emma asked. Sarah considered the question thoughtfully. I think people can change. But change requires genuine remorse and hard work. Whether she's done that work, I don't know. But it doesn't matter to us. We've moved on. Michael, now 10 years old, had been listening from the kitchen table where he was doing homework. Mom, at school they taught us about the civil rights movement. They said that sometimes people have to stand up to injustice even when it's scary. Is that what you did? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Yes, baby. That's exactly what we did. I'm proud of you, Michael said simply, returning to his math problems as if he hadn't just made his mother cry happy tears. Marcus wrapped his arms around Sarah. We raised good kids. We did, Sarah agreed. And we gave them a better world, even if just in our small corner of it. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the pain, the anger, the fight for justice. It had all been worth it. Because they hadn't just won a legal battle. They'd reclaimed their home, their peace, and their dignity. They'd shown their children that standing up to cruelty matters. That justice, though sometimes slow, does prevail. And they'd learned that a community bound together in support is stronger than any tyrant. The scars remained, both physical and emotional. But scars are proof of survival, of battles fought and won. And in the end, the Mitchells had done more than survive. They had triumphed. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, her last thought was simple but profound: love always defeats hate. Always.